Which Delaney family member is responsible for their matriarch's disappearance?
Why is Troy and his father's relationship so tumultuous?
And what is Savannah's real identity?
How many secrets is this family keeping?
Find out as Red and Red Real Reviews breaks down Annette Bening's first TV project in nearly 20 years, Apples Never Fall, on Peacock.
In her face, the mirror of your
I have 2.8% body fat. My body's like a microchip. A grain of sand could destroy it.
Any man who must say, I am the king, is no true king.
Someone will die.
Of fun.
And of murder.
So I told him to mark everything with the international symbol for gender. And,
Leslie, I typed your symptoms into the thing up here, and it says you could have network connectivity problems.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die.
My body's a microchip.
It's Halloween. That is really, really good timing.
make believe I'm everywhere, giving them a light.
My brain is on fire. I'm dying.
I should have been more specific.
I think it happens over a long period of time, just like piece by piece, you know?
I once forgot to brush my teeth for 5 weeks.
There is no middle ground.
I am the one who knocks.
Oh my God. The microchip has been compromised.
I want you to stand out. I want all of you to be as different as you can possibly be.
Written on the pages is the answer to a never-ending story.
Welcome back to another episode of Red and Red Real Reviews, and we're officially past episode 10, officially into double digits. So I guess that means we made it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, nice. D-Ace? Or is this 11?
11. This,
11.
Yeah. And
Oh,
and
11's my
Smiths.
number.
Is it really?
Yeah, well, I got married on 11/11.
That's right. Yeah. I was
Have an 11/11 thing.
And since it's an ironic enough, since we're past 10, it's also our first review of a Peacock show. We haven't done a Peacock show yet.
I know. I can't believe it. Actually, Peacock does have some decent shows, so I'm a little surprised it took us this long.
Yeah, they kind of get buried a little bit because everyone's going to Peacock for The Office, for Parks and Rec, for the stuff you could just put on mindlessly and watch.
Yeah, and I think the difference with Peacock too is it used to be very, very free, and now it is not so much.
Yeah. You
can't get anything for free on there anymore.
No, you gotta like sneak in on their annual end of year deals.
Yeah, that's the trick. But I remember I used to watch, every Dateline there was. It was my oasis for Dateline. And then all of a sudden it was like, now it's, there's some episodes that you can watch. Now it's like, never mind, you need a subscription, like a premium subscription in order to get any of them. So
yeah. Well, speaking of Oasis, I mean, Annette Bening's Oasis, I guess, has been filmed throughout the majority of her career. But this one, An Apples Never Fall, this is a television product, even though it's on streaming. And this is her first in a couple decades. So that was kind of an interesting note. And there's a lot of star power in this show as well.
yeah, what was the last thing that she did on TV? Was it a TV movie or something?
I looked it up, but I never heard of the show. It was something Harry, Forgetting Harry or Revealing Harry or something like that.
Okay, maybe it was some sort of like Lifetime, not Lifetime, because she's better than Lifetime, but maybe it was some sort of primetime TV movie or something. But
ooh, burn, Lifetime.
no, I like Lifetime. It's entertaining, but I guess it's not up to an Oscar nominee's standards, is it?
Right, that's right. So this show, Apples Never Fall, it's an interesting kind of premise. It's a little bit whodunit, it's a little bit murder mystery, and as we'll get into it towards the end of the show, it winds up being a bit of a family redemption tale. So what were your thoughts as far as the structure and the format of this show?
I mean, I think I did. I did notice when I opened up all the show and all the episodes and I started going through them, I noticed that each episode was the name of a family member. So I did like how they did each episode was a family member's point of view. I did like how they did that. But that being said, they didn't really exclude other, yes, it was from that person's point of view, but they didn't exclude, they didn't make the episode all about that one person, which I thought was good. They still had interactions with the other family members. It was just that kind of, it was kind of like each family member's origin story, like how, you see how messed up this family is, but you see why they're messed up, like why each family member is messed up, or what the problem is with the relationships inside the family. You see what made them deteriorate, the answer as to like what one thing pretty much was the culprit for making their relationships deteriorate. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I love that directing or writing style, whichever aspect of production you can attribute that towards, of having effectively the same story told through a different perspective. And for me, like, it was kind of like lining things up. Like the pilot was just a general overview. After that, it was, I think, episode 2 was Logan, episode 3 was Amy. Things started to come together for me in the 4th episode, which was from Brooke's perspective. So so like in a 7-episode series, it took 4 episodes for things to kind of start coming together and not to be so much guessing games.
Yeah, a lot of background information was needed, I think, because you have 4 kids, so it's needed to show what problems they had. So I think in the first episode, wasn't it called like Meet the Delaneys or something like that, or the Delaneys? So it just introduces the family as a whole, but as you kept going, there were all these questions that were introduced. It was like, okay, Troy is dating someone, but he's not saying who it is, or it's, I don't even know, it's Logan didn't want to or couldn't take over the academy, but why? It's, so there were questions posed. It was just we didn't know what the answer was. So you kind of start peeling back the onion layers with each episode of each family members.
Yeah, Amy's a wanderer, but why is she this kind of black sheep a little bit? Or
right,
Brooke is as you find out later, she's the youngest, so I guess she's kind of like the child that they got to perfect after they had experiments raising everyone else. But like that obviously had some different layers to it as well.
Right. And if you've heard any of the woo-woo business about birth order and how that determines what your personality is, it's kind of interesting once you start finding out, okay, Troy is the oldest, and then it's or no, is it
Troy?
Amy
No,
oldest?
it's the Troy.
It is Troy.
Amy, Logan, Brooke.
Yeah, and there were maybe it's because with this birth order stuff, I know a little bit about it, but apparently if you're like a middle child, like a true middle child of 3, it's like you have a different personality than if you're a middle child of 4, because you have like 2 middle right. childs in 4. So at times I was kind of questioning whether Logan was the youngest one, actually. Based on what they looked like, it was hard to tell by like age, like, what they looked like, who's the youngest, who's the oldest. But
middle child, do those middle children tend towards to bond together because they're the peanut butter and jelly, or does the older of the 2 bond with the oldest and the younger of the 2 bond with the youngest?
That's kind of what I assumed it was, because we'll get into that a little bit later, but I did notice that there were some alliances in the family. There's certain relationships and bonds that are different, and I know you can't relate to that being an only child, sadly, but I could relate to that being one of 3, and I'm the youngest. So that was kind of interesting. We'll explore those relationships in a little bit.
Yeah, and the other thing to me, as far as how the formation of the family was, there tended to be a little bit of theme of infidelity. Whereas, as you learned later on, apparently, although they never really got into it, maybe you assume it was Harry Haddad's father, but Joy had something going on the side behind Stan's back. Of course, Troy, in the middle of his divorce with his ex-wife, is having something going on with his boss's secretary. We later find out is actually his wife.
Right.
And then of course Brooke, engaged to this other young woman, and everyone loves her fiance, and Gina, yes, and that winds up being a situation where the main antagonist in the story manipulates Brooke a little bit. So there is almost a theme of infidelity as well inside the family.
Yeah, there is definitely infidelity. It's also just a theme of lying. They're all lying to each other about various things. And you see how many secrets they're keeping from each other, which is just and huge secrets.
Yeah. Like secrets that, as we find out, define the structure and chemistry of this family.
Right. And really make the whole story what it is.
Yeah.
They make the story, they give the story the outcome that it has.
Yeah, like a chain reaction, so to speak.
Right.
So we dived in a little bit already, and I guess we early on we were gonna get into our little film student sesh, which a lot of how this story develops is the relationships in the show that very much convoluted within the family. And so we want to talk about the ones that really stood out to you. To me, the one that took a lot of the juice of the show was Stan and Troy. Father, oldest son. You can kind of see this building a little bit as you learn there's a contentious relationship with Stan's training of Harry Haddad, the top student at the tennis academy. Troy's the first to assume Stan's guilt as Joy disappears. Stan disapproves of Troy's divorce with his wife. Troy's sleeping with his boss's wife, that we later find out is kind of a surrogate father figure. So you have this very contentious relationship between father and oldest son that I think maybe even sets the tone for the other relationships within the family.
I think so, because actually it happens within, I want to say the first 10 minutes of the first episode is when the family is talking about, well, why didn't dad answer back? Or why did he say that nothing was wrong or something like that? When they're all having lunch together, the kids, then Troy says, Brooke says something about, oh, well, why would he lie about that? And Troy's like, well, he was nice to you, like growing up. So, what do you know? And then you're kind of wondering, okay, why did he say that? What was their relationship like? And I don't think we really find out until halfway through the episodes what happened, or it was really towards the end when we really found out what happened. It was in the second to last episode, I think, but it kind of took a while for that, but it is the crux of the family, this oldest son and father relationship, because it causes Troy to put his opinion on the other kids, because he thinks, he's been wronged by their father. So he thinks that, oh, this guy definitely did it. Like, why don't you agree that he did it? Like, look at the evidence. And
maybe even a feeling of authority, because A, he's the oldest, and B, he's extremely successful in his own life. He's got this, this venture capitalist kind of investment firm role in his own personal life. He's got a lot of money. Obviously, as the story progresses, he's trying to pay off Savannah to get the heck out of their lives. It's obvious Troy's got some cheese behind him. So between this kind of professional success and the fact that he's the oldest Delaney child, it almost kind of feels like he forces his authority onto his siblings.
Right. It's like he has something to prove, even with, I think he mentions to Joy at one point, he's like, oh, well, don't tell dad that I paid for the Wimbledon trip, or, you know, you could tell he pays for things. He doesn't disclose to, it's a pride thing where I think Stan mentioned something about be a man or do this and be a man. So I think Troy is trying to pay for these things and trying to be a man, you know, quote unquote, but it's tough for him to get in there and persuade people of their father's guilt, but they kind of start believing him.
I think Stan's implication in that context is because Troy's paying for so much. Like he's trying to almost be this provider because Stan was so obsessed with his legacy as a tennis player that never got fulfilled, and then trying to live vicariously through his students at the academy. So it's almost because of Troy's willingness and ability to front the financial burden of all these things that he kind of calls him out. It's like, don't think that just because you've got some big bucks behind you that you're some, you know, big grown up boy.
Right. Or that you're a success, even though you have all this money. Like you're basically saying like, you're still nothing to me.
Yeah. And I mean, that is almost kind of ignited by the past relationship of Stan with Harry Haddad as our pupil.
Yeah, that was a weird one. And that was interesting how this father could choose this student of his over all his kids, really.
Yeah.
If he had it his way, he would have been coaching this kid to the very end, you know?
Yeah, maybe even raising him.
Right. Like he would have just taken that kid under his wing, and it's like it's almost like he didn't care about his biological kids or something.
Yeah. So we each had a couple, and I think we all had different ones. So what was one of your notable sibling relationships there?
Well, I noticed that, you know, any family, you have different chemistries between like parent and child. You have different chemistries between siblings. I know that I have like different relationships with my parents than my sisters do. And I have relationship with a different sister, like a sister that my other sister might not get along with. So you mesh with people well, and you have certain like little alliances and people you go to for certain things. And I think that family definitely had them. The biggest one that I saw, it seems like, again, probably because it's a birth order thing, they're the first and second oldest. Amy and Troy seem to be closer, and then Logan and Brooke seem to be closer. And so you have the siblings alliances with each other. Then you have all of the different parent-child relationships. So one of the notable ones, I think, with the parents was, for me, it was Brooke and Stan, because she was really the only one who kind of didn't believe that her father was guilty basically the whole time. Even Logan was going to the police with information and things like that. So he was kind of, you know, had one foot out the door, but she never really wavered. And then there was a certain relationship too, for me, between Troy and Joy. I didn't know that it rhymed, but she had an interesting relationship with him, and she did protect him all of these years. But I don't know, we can get to it when we talk about that at the very end, but I just don't really understand why she didn't reveal sooner that she was the reason for this. Like, why did she let Troy kind of take the blame and take the hit all these years? I thought that was kind of shitty as a mother.
Especially when her justification for doing that was to protect Troy, to protect the family.
Right. Like, you're hurting him because you're just making the father and son relationship worse. So why didn't you say something?
Well, and to double down on your whole older siblings bond versus younger siblings bond, I mean, Logan, maybe not as long as Brooke did, but Logan and Brooke were the ones that were clinging to Stan's innocence for a long duration of the show. versus Amy didn't necessarily implicate Stan right off the bat, but she was also clearly closer to Joy, because she was
Yes.
she was probably the first child to fall out of the tennis culture.
Mm-hmm.
And Joy, and as she stated, Joy was her rock. Joy was who she relied upon. And Troy, as we've said, obviously having this contentious relationship with Stan, he bonded more with Joy. Whereas Logan, either through tennis or through some assumption that he was going to take over the academy, bonded more towards Stan. Brooke being kind of the last hope at a champion, bonded more towards Stan. So you had the younger two that went more
Right.
towards the father, and the older two that went more towards the mother.
Right. And I feel like all of these indications of which kid favored which parent or vice versa, all those indications were literally in the pilot episode when they're sitting there at lunch and Amy she's relentless. She keeps being like, let's call mom. I called her about 30 times, but like, she's the one that's like, but what if this happened? But we need to check this. But what about mom? Like she's the only one that's like very, very worried. And you can tell.
Which is ironic because as the show comes to a close and you realize Joy was just upset because nobody was returning her calls after the fight. And they're all like, well, why don't we call mom? It's like, well, apparently she's been calling you for 3 days and nobody wanted to answer.
Yeah. I mean, I will get into that at the end too. Like I was like, you know what? If this lady had felt like one of her kids appreciated her, she wouldn't have gone off and disappeared.
Right.
And just been like, screw them. Like, I don't want to reach out to them. Ugh. Like,
1 out of 4. That shouldn't be that high a batting average to field a phone call from your mom, I guess. I don't know. None of them wanted to answer the phone.
Like this whole thing would not have happened. And not to mention, the police are devoting their resources, time and money. Like I would love to see like in the credits, like the police sued them for this amount of money because they wasted millions of dollars of resources.
Final credit roll, #taxation is theft. So another relationship I noticed is that not so much a sibling, but a parent sibling is the fact that when Indira comes back, and she visits Logan on his houseboat, and he comes to the realization that he's gonna leave Miami and go out to Seattle where her research paper is, and he comes to the realization that he's the lapdog of the family, and you kind of start to connect some dots there because, like we said, Amy has Joy, Brooke has Stan, Troy has Joy, but in kind of a black sheep type of way, and Logan is kind of the odd man out in the Delaney children, where he's constantly, he has kind of no guidance because he kind of doesn't totally align with one parent or the other. He's always seeking approval. He kind of has this role of being unsuccessful as far as being able to take over the academy when none of the other children were willing or able to do so. It kind of maybe makes you have a soft spot for Logan, even though he's the one that kind of threw Stan under the bus with the video. It kind of makes you have a soft spot for him because he doesn't really have an identity within this family.
I noticed that too. It's Amy is like a free spirit and you're like, oh, maybe she's the black sheep, but he's kind of the true black sheep in that they treat him like he's a screw up. And also, I mean, it's almost to me like, I know this can happen sometimes with larger families than 4, but to me, it almost seems like Logan acts like a parent to Brooke, his younger sister. It's like he's playing the role of the father, like, okay, I noticed this, like, I just wanted to show this to you. Like he kind of like, protects her and acts like a parent, but it is weird that he doesn't really favor either of the parents very much. I did notice that.
Yeah, he's very much an independent child, despite the fact that he was the one assumed to take over the academy.
He's sort of a lone wolf.
Yeah. And he's the kind of one that kind of broke off and did his own thing.
Yes, he
I mean,
very
I-
much operated on his own and didn't tell them what he was going to do.
Yeah. I mean, I guess technically they all did. I mean, they all kind of went off in a direction that didn't have anything to do with tennis, but his was kind of breaking off in a sense of he theoretically had a role within the family business and then just boop, gone.
And he had information that he thought showed evidence of their father's guilt. And so he had information that none of them had, and he didn't share it with them. One of the things that was sad to me getting away from siblings, you made reference to it before, Troy and his boss. That was, and I think his girlfriend, Lucia, when she comes over, they have that whole situation with when his boss finally finds out it was him, and then she comes over and she's like, no, I'm done. They have that whole conversation. I think she actually uses the word, like, you mess things up with your surrogate father. I think she does say surrogate father. And she reminds him that he screwed up with that. And it's, yeah, I mean, that whole thing happened because of his relationship with his dad. And again, infidelity. So just all these different.
Which was funny because Troy walks in and he like has this big spiel about how they're happy together and they love each other and they should be together, yada yada yada. And then like he encounters Monty, his boss, and he knows they're like, oh, she's sleeping with someone else, it's over, but like he's a wreck. So then Troy has this realization like, oh, she did it. She told him we could be together.
Yeah.
So he goes and thinks like he's being the bigger man, telling Monty that he's the one that slept with his wife. And then because of that, Lucia says, oh, it's over. This was just a fun fling thing. So it's like Troy's almost in a position where he can't win. Like if he shows loyalty to his boss and stays hidden in the shadows, Lucia may not be with him because they're just in the shadows and they can't really commit to being with each other, even though they told that to each other that they were committed to one another. But at the same time, if he comes out and he says like, hey, this is what happened. This is what I did. And she's like, oh no, I'm done with you. So it's like, this poor guy can't win. He can't win his own family, can't win with another family.
Yeah. I mean, I hope he finds a high paying job somewhere else. But what I found was interesting is, don't they mention that he didn't cheat on his wife with Lucia? He cheated on his wife with a volleyball player or tennis player or something.
Yeah, I kind of got the sense early on that he probably was sleeping with Lucia, and that's what ended.
Or did he
divorce.
lie about it?
But
Yeah,
then
maybe he lied about it.
I got the feeling later on that maybe they weren't necessarily overlapping.
Yeah, either he cheated twice, or well, he cheated once with this person we don't know, and then he got into this affair with his boss's wife, or he was cheating on his wife with Lucia and just told his family, or his family found out and he told them that it was because doesn't Stan or Amy, somebody mentions it like, oh well, you cheated on Claire with that person, and like maybe that's just what he told them, just because he didn't want to say, oh hey, by the way, I'm sleeping with my boss's wife.
Yeah, or it was something deeper, like maybe their chemistry wasn't as profound as the family once thought, and he didn't want to accept that and let them believe that his marriage is a lie. So of course we have to discuss the elephant in the room, and that is the role of Savannah, the con artist allegedly known as Savannah anyway. And by the end, it becomes revealed, and I think we're getting to the point now in our show where we're deep enough in where we're not saying a spoiler right off the rip. By the time we get into the end of the show and it becomes revealed that her real name is Lindsay Haddad, she's Harry's sister. Did you kind of see that coming? Like, I think we both kind of had the sense that she had a role in Joy's disappearance. but I don't necessarily know that we pegged her to be Harry's sister.
Right. I didn't suspect that she was Harry's sister the whole time. The only thing is I started to suspect that she was targeting their family. And I didn't know if I literally didn't have sister in my mind, but I did have in my mind, maybe she is associated with Harry somehow.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I didn't know in what way that was. She could have been a cousin for all I know,
Yeah.
like a friend, a girlfriend, you know, anybody. So I wasn't sure of how she was involved, but wasn't there like a newspaper clipping? At that point, I was like, okay, she's targeting them because of their family specifically.
And that clipping was what tipped off the police to figure, okay, we don't know anything about this woman, but she had this is in her
Yes.
possession before she wound up at the Delaney's house.
Mhm.
She's obviously targeting them. So they already had that theory
Mhm.
that she was doing this, that she was screwing around, and they still went with all this evidence that pointed to Stan. Like they still kind of wrote Savannah off as a suspect. So like that, it's kind of wild to me that they had this smoking gun,
Mhm.
and the children were also very skeptical of this individual, and the cops kind of came to this conclusion where like, okay, maybe it is really her, but they still went with Stan. Maybe they were just desperate to close the case. Maybe they just wanted to pin the tail on the donkey, so to speak. Like I kind of thought like, here's this smoking gun, and the cops found it, and they knew it was there, and they knew the kids were pointing at this woman questioning her, and they just kind of wrote it off.
They kind of did let it slide. And I think it was almost like they did let it slide because they couldn't find her for a while, right? They didn't know where she was. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, like we have to like kind of follow up on that lead. But in the meantime, this Stan guy looks pretty good. Like,
Yeah.
it was kind of a convenience thing for them. They were being a little bit lazy with it. Like, oh, well, we don't know where she is. So we can't really figure out if she did it or not yet.
She fell off the face of the earth to the cops. She fell off the face of the earth to the Delaney's.
Yeah.
No one could find this woman. No one.
Yeah. Apparently she's a damn good con artist, right?
Yeah. And she also has this kind of dichotomous relationship with Joy where at the end it becomes realized, but really throughout you start to notice that she looks up to Joy.
Mm-hmm.
She has this almost deity-like worship of Joy, and you obviously come to the conclusion at the end after Harry tells the children what their home life, what the Hadad home building was like, where the mother was a bit of a train wreck, and after Joy told Harry's father that to fire Stan, they ran off and went to do training, and Savannah, Lindsay, whatever we want to call her, was left at home with this crazy mother. And you kind of have that, even without that confirmation, you have this sense that she does look up to Joy, but then at the end with where she confronts her about it, she doesn't want to let her go. Like, so she looks up to her, but at the same time, she'd rather not take her home, drive reckless speeds, get in an accident, put her in a situation where she's at risk, despite this trail of breadcrumbs, so to speak, that she has this otherworldly admiration for her.
Right. I think it's just a mental illness. You know, she was screwed up from her childhood and she was just very irrational. It's almost like a stalker mentality, right? It's like, if I can't have you, no one else can. Like that whole mentality. And I mean, you can tell the moment when she knocks on their door, and that night or the next morning or whatever, Joy is dabbing the cuts on her face and stuff like that. You can tell that she's asking questions, and you can tell that she looks at her as a mother figure from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And so that's why it was interesting when Joy was able to calm her down in the car enough for it to be, I wouldn't say okay, because they ended up crashing anyway, but what was crazy to me was that after all that, after she had put Joy up on this pedestal, that she was still like, I hope you can forgive me. Bye. It's a hit and run. Like,
Right.
yeah, like she literally took her purse and was like, I'm out. Like,
And
didn't even
that-
help Joy get out of the car. Like,
right. She just looks at her, says, I'm sorry. You can't see Joy. So for all we know, she could be mangled beyond repair.
yeah, like,
And she's
I'm
like,
sorry,
"I'm
you're
sorry, I'm sorry."
unconscious.
Flee. And and we'll get into our thoughts on the ending before we wrap up, but like you also feel a little bit robbed from the story, that there was no sense of justice for Savannah, for Lindsay, that she just kind of took off at the end and there's no resolution on, did the cops find her? Does the family ever get to confront her about what she did, why
Right.
she did it, blah 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 blah.
Yeah, they kind of left it a little bit unresolved at the end. It was just like, oh, well, they're looking for Savannah or something.
Yeah. It's like, well, okay. She kind of was a linchpin in imploding this family's already volatile dynamic, and we just kind of forget that she goes off and disappears, and they're never gonna find her.
Yeah. That to me was a little bit you just don't feel like there's justice, like
Right.
you said.
And speaking of justice, so obviously Stan's story was proven true about stuffing the duffel bag with trophies and dumping it in the ocean. And of course, that looked like it was a body on the video. Logan shared with the
Right.
police. But I was almost thinking from that, like, I still at that point did not implicate Stan in Joy's disappearance. But I'm almost, my brain went a different direction. I was almost thinking that, okay, Savannah did something to Joy,
Mhm.
and Stan, the enraged husband, goes after this woman that took his wife, killed her, hurt her very badly, whatever the case may be, offed her, stuffed her in a bag, and then brings her out to sea to get rid of her body.
Oh, I did not think of that way.
That was kind of where I was going with it. Like, I don't, I'm thinking in my mind, like, I still don't think that that's Joy in the bag, but I still don't rule out that it is a body in the bag.
Well, here's the reason why I believed that Stan was carrying Joy's body in the bag, right? This is what didn't totally check out for me as far as crime, right? When Logan has that video from the boat, there is sound, because my closed captioning was saying bag dragging on ground or something like that, right?
Binge the Ginge, the caption queen.
Yeah, caption queen. So it said like bag drags on ground, or it said something. So the video had sound clearly, right? What I could not understand, and maybe it was done this way to make it so that like it gave you doubt, but to me, okay, he's got all these trophies, right? They're wood, they're metal. You are telling me that there was not any sort of clanging, the metal banging together, like when he's dragging it? You know what I'm saying? Like, that did not check out to me. It would be loud. Like, if you ever tried to move something that's metal, do you know you can't do it silently?
No.
So for him to be just dragging a bag of trophies and it not make a single sound besides dragging, that didn't check out for me.
Especially when they're all gold and brass. It's not like it's a bag of aluminum cans.
Right. These are heavy metals that should be clanging together.
Well, the other thing to me is like, and that kind of, I guess, alludes to our previous point about the cops just wanting a conviction, an easy way out of this case, is the fact that you do hear that, and they knew Stan's argument at this point, or shortly thereafter, they knew Stan's argument that it was a bag full of trophies. So at some point, whether before they heard the video or shortly thereafter, they knew what the defendant's argument was, and they hear the audio and they're like, it did kind of sound like objects. Like, unless he's like woofing everything off the shelf or grabbing a trophy and beating Joy with it, like, it doesn't sound like it's a violent act. It sounds like it's just him going haywire in his office.
Right. Yeah. I could see that too, but there were some things that just didn't check out to me. It was like they wanted you to think a certain way, so they set it up in a way that made it seem plausible to you. If I had heard some metal clanging, I would have been like, there is no body in that bag.
Yeah.
But they did that on purpose.
Yeah. So we've gotten into a habit of late of pointing out quotes from the shows we review that stood out or had some kind of significant standing in the show towards the content or the overall message. So a couple I found, one was very early on, and I'm interested to know your take on this, not being a sports fan. So when they're talking about Stan's past achievements, and Stan always kind of poo-poos his achievements as like, whatever. I didn't win the big one or whatever. And he says like, there's no gain in looking back, especially in sports. And Savannah says, well, shame on sports. Like, she's almost trying to like play up his ego a little bit. To like, well, to make him seem like, hey, you were this successful coach, you were a successful athlete. Like, you should kind of be proud of this.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. And which, as obviously now putting two and two together as the show went along and her relationship with Joy grew, it seems odd that she was trying to build up Stan's ego.
Yeah, for a little bit, I thought that they were setting up the fact that Savannah was having an affair with Stan, right? Did you get that impression at one point?
I did not, actually.
They were kind of making it look like that. Remember when the three of them, Joy, Stan, and Savannah, are on that boat, and Savannah and Stan are like talking, and they say something and they're like laughing, and Joy was like, oh, what are you guys talking about? They're like, oh, nothing. Like, they were kind of leaving her out of their joke or whatever.
Oh,
so
on the cliffhanger when they went to the next episode.
So they were kind of insinuating that like, oh, like Savannah's definitely sleeping with Stan.
Yeah.
That was before the whole thing with Brooke was revealed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was like, I had to run that back a little bit to the end of the episode because they kind of did as a cliffhanger. I'm like, wait, what the hell did they say? Was that something prominent? But they're just like doing some flirtatious BS, I guess.
You're like trying to read lips or putting it in slow-mo, like, what are they saying? Yeah. No, they definitely set things up multiple times. It was a storytelling device to be a distraction. So they tried to make you think that Savannah and Stan were together. Then they tried to make you think that Stan was getting rid of her body, all of these things. They try to distract you so that you don't see the other thing coming.
Yeah. Well, speaking of distraction, another one I noticed was something Gina said, where she was referring to the first time she met the family, and she said, I said there was a violence in all of you.
Yeah.
Well, I almost feel like this is a distraction, not necessarily to the story, but to the viewer, because they have the police's digging into Stan's father's past and how he was a very angry and violent man. Mm-hmm. And you see how Troy kind of snaps very easily. So for her, it's almost like they're trying to inception you to think like there is a track record of sorts that this family is capable of some dirty deeds.
Yes. Yeah, that was a great quote. All the ones you wrote down, I was like, yes, these were by far all of the impactful ones that I remember.
Yeah, and Gina again. Gina was a very minute character in this, but she was a very good character. Where when Brooke discloses to her that she slept with Savannah, and she said, and she's like trying to even the score, I guess, because she thought that Gina was cheating on her. She said, "What score? We're supposed to be on the same team." And Brooke says, "Scores like that's who I am. I'm a Delaney." Like it kind of ingrains this competitive nature that the family always has against like trying to win, trying to be the top.
Right. And it's not just about tennis. It's just competitive in every sense of the word.
Yeah. Yeah. In sports and tennis and life,
Yeah.
whatever the case may be. Uh, Savannah, we touched on this a little bit extraneously, where Savannah says, I think she said it to Troy. I think it was when Troy was trying
Yeah,
to buy her off.
I thought she said it to Brooke, but I know she said it to one of the kids. I can't remember who it was.
Yeah, she's like, you don't deserve her. You know that, right? None of you do. And that kind of ingrains, obviously you don't necessarily find out about it till more towards the end, but that kind of ingrains that belief that she's trying to latch on to Joy because her own family system was a bit of a train wreck and a disaster. And when her father left with Harry, that kind of set the wheels in motion to her just being a complete disaster.
Right. And it was like, none of you appreciate her, so I'm going to.
Yeah.
It was just a little dig.
Yeah.
So she's going to be my mom.
Depression.
Yeah. Psycho.
Yeah. And in a lighter moment, of course, at the end when, everyone's home and they reconcile their differences and Joy looks outside and sees the damage the hurricane did. And she's like, what a mess. And Stan looks at her, says, you talk about the court, or like, I thought that was kind of a lighthearted moment, because this family has had such a tumultuous path, not only in the last couple months, throughout the timeline of the show, but also just throughout their whole family history.
Or do you think he was referring to the family as a whole, or do you think he was referring to the marriage?
I think family as a whole.
Yeah.
Because even when she says, you really thought he could kill me? Or you really thought he would kill me? Like, who would believe that? And he kind of turns around and says, well, they did. And like, even in that moment, you could tell that Joy still had Stan's back. So yes, to that point, to your point, I would think that he was referring to the family as a whole and not.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that could make sense. Cause I mean, you could tell that I wouldn't say they're estranged, but they obviously have their issues in their marriage. But even though they have their issues in their marriage, she still was like, you thought that guy did it?
Yeah. And even when he tells her when she goes upstairs to bed and he comes upstairs and he tells her, like, listen, you always want to know where I ran off to when we had fights. And he discloses about his violent father, and he says, like, I ran off because I love you. I didn't want to hurt you. And I was afraid that this, ingrained DNA in me would come out and I would hurt you. That's why I went off. I was just driving around.
Yeah, that was a good quote too. That was a good quote too, when he was like, nowhere. And she's like, what did you say? And he's like, I went nowhere. Whenever I left, that's where I went.
Yeah. So to wrap up the show, final thoughts. There was kind of a reconciling at the end. To me, like, they set this show up like it was going to be fictionalized true crime or a real murder mystery. There was going to be a body at the end. But to me, it kind of felt like a feel-good story. It kind of felt like there's all this chaos in this family, and at the end, they still find a way to come together and realize they're still a family. But the other side of it is, as we've discussed off air, as far as people talking on the interwebs, was this predictable? Was the ending predictable for you?
I don't think it was. I watch a lot of true crime. I watch a lot of stuff like this. And actually, this is a book, I believe, by a woman who's written a lot of things. She also wrote Big Little Lies, I guess, on HBO.
Oh, okay.
That was a great show. But so, there are a lot of books like this and in that genre. I've watched a lot of true crime. I've watched a lot of docu-series and true crime docs, and I did not think it was predictable. And I think they definitely did have some storytelling techniques to try to lead you away, you know, making you think that it was Stan so that you wouldn't see Savannah coming as the suspect. So they did make things seem a certain way to kind of trick you a little bit. And I think that was pretty successful. And maybe you didn't know how it was all. I mean, I kind of thought that eventually a body would turn up of Joy. I didn't know that it was going to end with her being alive and well. I never would have thought that was how it would end when I was watching the first episode. So you always think the worst, kind of, you know, it's that negativity bias, right? So I thought it would end badly, and you know, the family would be stronger because of it. But you know, I didn't think it was that predictable at all as far as things I've seen.
Right. And even in the sense of that, the way I thought it was going, I still kind of thought a different outcome than what it wound up being. Like you said, you were expecting the body. I was expecting Joy to be dead. I didn't think she was going to be alive. When they had that scene where you finally see Savannah again, and she walks in the house, and Joy's like, "Oh, hi," you know.
That was eerie.
Yeah, like I wasn't expecting to see her alive. I definitely thought she was in a ditch. I didn't think Stan was the one that put her in a ditch, but I was nonetheless expecting her to be in a ditch.
Right, because they implied it with the blood on the bike, right? And it ends up being this whole thing where she falls off the bike.
Accident.
Like,
you're dumb luck.
And then you have two people in a truck that looks like a guy and a girl picking the bike up and putting it in their truck, and you're like, okay, these people murdered this woman and they took her and her bike.
Or her sweater. They're thinking like, okay, Stan had the bloody sweater, he buried it in the neighbor's yard. It turned out she walked her ass all the way home, just nonchalantly threw it in the garbage can. It falls on the ground. The neighbor's dog runs over and picks it up. Of course, the animal smells blood, thinks it's food, probably.
Right.
Picks it up, runs it over, probably buried it in the yard, like dogs can do at times. Like, so all these like pieces of evidence that they thought were complete implications of guilt were just random accidents or happenings of life.
Things were not what they seem. You know, you're seeing it as a viewer, you're seeing this and you're seeing that, and you're like, oh, maybe that makes it look like that. And nope, that's not the case. And that happened several times. And yes, that was a technique they used to make it not so predictable.
Yeah. And speaking of techniques, what did you think of this kind of full circle ending where the family comes together and it's almost like a forgiveness thing? Stan and Troy embrace at the end, and they realize that, like, you know, even though they all came to this conclusion that Stan was guilty, Joy kind of defeats that immediately and says, "It's like he was like, you thought he could kill me? Like, all the times he walked out, you never thought I killed him."
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty happy. I was content. I don't want to say happy. I want to say content with the ending, just because I think, you know, we have the connotation of a happy ending being like, oh, everyone just, you know, holds hands and smiles and rides off into the sunset. And that's not really what it is. I think what it was, what you mean by full circle, is that there were all these things that were dividing them the whole time. And could break them apart because there were secrets and lies and miscommunications and all sorts of things. And it could have divided them to the point where they're all not speaking. They're all estranged from each other by the end, but it didn't end that way. You know, it became them accepting what they know about each other and them accepting the way that their family is and kind of living in the dysfunction and embracing it.
They wind up cleaning up the yard together. How much more wholesome can you get?
Right. I mean, the only thing was we have that little bit of like, we have like a taste of justice, but not really, because it's implied that Savannah, they're going to find her in, you know, for the accident, at least for like the hit and run, I guess. But yeah, it's just the fact too that what was on the back burner in my mind again is, but the police wasted all this money and time.
Yes. Yeah, and other than that, the only thing that bothered me, and it didn't really bother me enough to ruin the show, but when they do kind of have this recoming together, and Joy still kind of puts a little bit of blame on them, like, It's like, we missed you. We were falling apart. We didn't know where you were. She's like, well, I was calling you for 3 days and no one answered the phone. No one answered a text message. And I'm like, is this woman for real? She's like they're all like clearly distraught that she was gone for a week, for 3 weeks or whatever. And she sits there blaming them because they couldn't answer the phone.
I know. I remember thinking, but again,
What a bitch.
it didn't ruin the whole show for me either. But I was kind of like, damn, she still has that attitude after what she did. Like she just, stuck her nose in the air, was like, screw these kids. They don't appreciate me. Yeah. I'm not going to reach out to them. And what did it end up being? Like, wasn't it like 2 weeks?
Yeah. It was like 2 or 3 weeks.
It's not like she was gone 2 days. She was gone 2 weeks.
And mind you, she's living it up in the mountains with Savannah. Like, it wasn't like she was desperate to contact her family this whole time. It didn't appear like she had any desire to reach back out to them until the very end.
Right.
So it's just like this woman's a screw loose. She might be the glue that holds this family together, but she's kind of mean.
Gee, I got that too a little bit. I was like, man, that was a little harsh. Like to have that attitude after all this happened, and they've been looking for you, and they've been suspecting their father did it because you didn't come home for 2 weeks. You just refused to come home.
Yeah. Really?
Right. She created the whole thing. And that's what kind of ticked me off a little bit. Like, because of her pride or her attitude, that's why this whole thing happened. But we wouldn't have a book or a movie or show because of this.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we didn't tick you off. And if you've got harsh opinions of us, let us know in the comments section below. Make sure you follow along with us on Instagram and TikTok. Right over here, Binge the Ginge. That's with dots between the words on Instagram, but one word on TikTok. And myself, yours truly, Nutmeg 2 Palmetto. That is the number 2. Give us both follows and stay tuned to Red and Red Real reviews on all of our platforms. Video-wise, to see our sparkling ginger hair on YouTube and Rumble. And if you're on the go, tune in audio. Rumble, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. Until the next real review, Red and Red, signing out.
Bye.
In less than an hour, aircraft from here will join others from around the world. And you will be launching the largest aerial battle in the history of mankind.
Hey guys, you ready to let the dogs out?
What?
Do what?
I'd like to be pimps from Oakland or cowboys from Arizona, but it's not Halloween.
Let the dogs out, like, who let the dogs out? Who? Who brought this guy along?
Slow ahead. I can go slow ahead. Come on down and chum some of this shit.
Grow up, Peter Pan. Count Chocula.
X never, ever marks the spot.
One more thing. Do me a favor. Don't go chasing waterfalls.
You did. You crazy son of a bitch, you did.
Mankind, that word should have new meaning for all of us today. We can't be consumed by our petty differences anymore.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
No. Try not. Do. Or do not. There is no try.
All right. Then you do us proud. Because I don't want no scrubs.
Don't act so surprised, Your Highness. You weren't on any mercy mission.
Not from tyranny, oppression, or persecution, but from annihilation. We're fighting for our right to live.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
I'll take care, all right? None but love for you. None but love for you.
10. X marks the spot.
Have any clue what's about to happen to him?
Oh, not a chance in hell. Good night.
Blow up! Peace!
Smile, you son of a...
Whodunit, motherfucker.
Hey,
Ain't too proud to beg.
Come on.
What?
It's not funny anymore.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not trying to
TLC references.
I don't. Still, nothing. I swear to you.
But as the day when the world declared in one voice, we will not go quietly into the night, we will not vanish without a fight, we're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today, we celebrate